This is the brand new Pixel 11 Pro XL, and Google has created a bit of a problem for itself this year because at $1299 in the US, this now costs basically the exact same amount as the Galaxy S26 Ultra. So the question becomes pretty simple. Like, if you have this much money to spend on an Android phone, should you buy the brand new Pixel 11 Pro XL or Samsung's Ultra, which has already been out for like 5 months? And there's been a lot of hate around the Pixel 11 series, especially when it comes to performance and the price increase. But I don't think it's quite that simple, because I've actually really enjoyed using this phone. And depending on what you care about, I could totally see someone choosing this over the S26 Ultra. The problem is though, at this price, Google doesn't get the "it's cheaper" excuse anymore. I want to start with the design. This still very much looks like a Pixel. The overall dimensions are basically unchanged from last year. Google removed the temperature sensor, which quite frankly I never used anyway, so I'm not exactly losing sleep over this, but they replaced it with this new feature called Highlight. There's basically a little light on the back of the phone that can now glow when something important is happening, like a call from a specific contact or when you're using Gemini. And look, I completely understand what Google is trying to do here. We're probably heading toward this world where our phones become these ambient AI assistants and you're not constantly supposed to be staring at the screen. So Highlight gives your phone another way to communicate with you without you having to pick it up. But the problem is, during my entire review period, I basically forgot it existed because I almost never put my phone face down like this, right? I put it screen up because I want to see who's calling me, see my notifications, and also I don't really want my display rubbing against whatever is on the table. So maybe Highlight becomes something more useful in the future. What I do really like is the overall Pixel design, and I know some of you are going to fight me on this, but I generally think Pixels are some of the best looking Android phones on the market. They're just different. Google isn't doing the same camera arrangement everybody else is doing. You still have that camera bar running across the back. You have this nice two-tone look, and the rounded edges make the phone really comfortable to hold. The Galaxy S26 Ultra is obviously a beautiful phone too, but it's bigger, it's wider, it has to accommodate an S Pen. And even though Samsung rounded things out this year, the Pixel still feels nicer in my hand. The displays are also very close, okay? You're looking at a 6.8-inch display on the Pixel 11 Pro versus 6.9 inches on the Galaxy S26 Ultra. But the Samsung still has one display feature that I desperately want every flagship manufacturer to copy: the anti-reflective coating, okay? You can be sitting underneath a light, outside, whatever, and you don't have this giant reflection staring back at you. The Pixel 11 Pro XL is basically the opposite, and this thing reflects like crazy. And once you get used to a really good anti-reflective display like Samsung's, going back to a glossy panel becomes surprisingly annoying. Google does technically win the brightness battle. The Pixel peaks at 3600 nits while Samsung rates the S26 Ultra at 2600. So your HDR might pop a little more on the Pixel. Now, Samsung also has privacy display. You can turn it on manually, have it activate for certain apps, hide notifications, passwords, basically prevent people beside you from clearly seeing what's on your screen. It's something different, and for people who travel constantly or use their phones on public transit, I can see it being very useful. As far as actual image quality goes, both displays are excellent. Samsung tends to make everything look a little more vivid and contrasty, which I think a lot of people are going to prefer visually. The Pixel looks a little bit more restrained. Neither one is bad, they're just tuned using different philosophies. Now, one area where I definitely prefer the Pixel is the front-facing camera. You get a 42 megapixel autofocus selfie camera compared to 12 megapixels on the Galaxy. The actual pictures just look better to me on the Pixel. My skin has better color. The colors are more detailed. My face doesn't look as pale. On the Galaxy, every once in a while I get a selfie that looks slightly soft. So if you're somebody who takes a lot of selfies, I think the Pixel has the advantage. Galaxy S26 Ultra versus Pixel 11 Pro XL front-facing camera going in and out of the shade. Sun is hitting me directly in the face. Let me know how these phones are handling exposure. I'm gonna go backlit for 1 second. I will say the Pixel 11 Pro XL does have a wider front-facing camera, which is nice. I'll punch in a little bit so it's gonna crop. Makes it look a bit more equal. But yeah, it's windy, it's a little noisy. Let me know how the audio sounds, which one's doing a better job with the noise cancellation. Face Unlock is also more useful on the Pixel because Google's system is secure enough to authenticate inside supported apps and approved purchases, whereas Samsung is more of a general facial unlock without the added protection. But there's still one major weakness, and that is darkness. Pixel Face Unlock has gotten better in low light compared to the Pixel 10 Pro XL, but when you're in a really dark room, it's still nowhere near something like Apple's Face ID system. Now, there is one extremely easy reason to buy the Galaxy S26 Ultra, and that's obviously the S Pen. Like, if you're an S Pen user, none of the rest of this conversation really matters because the Pixel just doesn't have one. Now, before we get into performance, because I already know that's going to be the controversial part of this video, I want to talk about the software. And this is probably the biggest reason why I personally like the Pixel so much. Pixel software just feels nice. And Pixel is not stock Android. So let's get that out of the way. This is Pixel OS, Google's interpretation of what Android should be. The animations, typography, the notification, material design, the way the quick settings work. There's just something cohesive about the entire experience. It's probably my favorite Android software experience right now. Nothing OS is also pretty close. One UI is obviously fantastic too, but One UI feels more like a power user operating system than one for the masses. Samsung gives you everything, sometimes literally twice. You have Samsung's version of an app, Google's version of the app, Samsung service, Google service. Now, you can clean that stuff up, and I always customize my Samsung phones quite heavily, but the Pixel just feels cleaner out of the box with far less duplication. Samsung's advantage is that if there's something obscure feature you want, it's probably buried somewhere inside One UI. And look, DeX is a perfect example. Most people will never use it. Some may have never heard of it, but being able to connect your phone to a monitor and basically turn it into a desktop computer is really freaking cool. You can't do that on the Pixel. But there's also one Pixel feature I've been using constantly that I think is going to become a much bigger deal than people realize, and that's Gboard Rambler. Basically, you hit this enhanced microphone button and just talk. You can ramble. You can say 15 times. You can change your mind halfway through a sentence. You can repeat yourself. And instead of simply transcribing every stupid thing you say word for word, it cleans everything up and reorganizes your thoughts into something coherent. This is the new Rambler feature. We're gonna do a little test, okay? We're gonna, let's think here. You know what? Let's make a little note to remind me about wishing my son a happy birthday on his birthday on October 16th. Actually, you know what? His birthday's actually October 17th. No, it's actually October 16th. Who am I kidding? My wife's birthday, forget that. I'm not wishing her a happy birthday. She can wish me a happy birthday, but I don't know when her birthday is. Maybe it's October 11th. And my daughter, we gotta wish her a happy birthday too. Oh man, when is it? I think it's October 3rd. Yeah, so basically remind me to wish all three people a happy birthday on those dates. It's basically doing what apps like Whisperflow are doing and putting that idea directly into the keyboard. All right, we gotta talk about Tensor G6 because this is where it's gonna get a bit heated. Maybe literally, because yes, the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 inside the Galaxy S26 Ultra is obviously significantly faster. Like, there's no way around it. And in my testing, single core performance was roughly 25% faster on the Galaxy, and multi-core was around 50% faster. Like, that's a massive difference. And if you're spending $1,300 on a flagship phone, I think it's completely fair to criticize Google for that. But here's the weird part. Using these phones normally, I can't feel the difference. Like, if you're gaming, get the Samsung. Easy, right? Games run better, frame rates are more consistent, you have significantly more GPU performance available. I noticed occasional drop frames on the Pixel that I just wasn't seeing on the Galaxy. Everything's playable on the Pixel, it's fine, but apples to apples, the S26 Ultra is clearly the better gaming phone. Where Google deserves some credit is efficiency. This is the coolest running Tensor phone I have ever used. When I set the Pixel up, downloading apps, syncing everything, basically hammering the phone, it got warm. It didn't get roasting hot. And if you've used older Tensor Pixels, you know that's actually a meaningful improvement. My stress testing told a similar story. The Samsung produced significantly higher performance, but the Pixel maintained its performance extremely well over repeated loops, and battery drain was excellent. In fact, it had the higher stability score overall. So Tensor G6 creates this really weird argument. It's not remotely the fastest flagship processor, but Google seems to have focused heavily on making the experience more efficient and consistent. And for most people, that's probably the right decision. The problem is that once you start charging flagship money, enthusiasts like myself are absolutely allowed to say, okay, Google, why am I getting this much less performance for the same price? Google also changed the modem this generation, moving away from the modem setup that previous Pixels used, a Qualcomm modem to a MediaTek one. And historically, connectivity has been one of those bigger complaints with Pixel phones. But listen, so far, I've had no problems. Calls have been solid. Battery drain from cellular hasn't stood out to me, and the reception has been basically on par with my S26 Ultra. Even in a couple of areas where older Pixels tended to struggle, this performed very well. Now we gotta talk about the cameras, and this is probably the area that surprised me the most, because looking purely at hardware, you'd expect Samsung to destroy the Pixel. Samsung gives you a 200 megapixel main camera, 50 megapixel ultra wide, a dedicated 10 megapixel 3x, and a 50 megapixel 5x telephoto. Google gives you a 50 megapixel main camera, 48 ultra wide, and one 48 megapixel 5x telephoto. But if I'm just taking photos, I'm choosing the Pixel. Not because Samsung takes bad photos. They take fantastic photos. I just find the Pixel to be more consistent. Samsung still loves making photos pop. Greens become greener, blues become bluer, shadows get lifted, everything looks bright and vibrant. And honestly, a lot of people are going to prefer that. But sometimes it goes a little too far. There were photos where Samsung pushed the sky so aggressively that areas around trees started looking strange and overprocessed. It's almost like somebody grabbed the blue slider in Lightroom and got a little too excited. The Pixel is more comfortable, leaving a shadow as a shadow. Both ultra wides are really good. The Pixel goes a little wider, which I like because you can squeeze more into the frame. With zoom, things get more interesting. Samsung has the advantage around 3x because it has an actual dedicated 3x camera. The Pixel doesn't, it has to crop in. At 5x, both phones have dedicated telephoto hardware. And once I started pushing towards 10x, I was surprised how competitive the Pixel was. In a lot of my shots, I actually preferred the detail coming from Google's processing. Also, you can now go up to 120 times digital zoom compared to only 100 on the Galaxy. Nighttime is much closer. Both phones can take great low light photos. Samsung still tends to brighten the scene more aggressively. Sometimes that looks great. Other times the colors start moving away from what was actually there. Like I took one photo of a leaf bag where Samsung completely changed the color compared to what I was seeing, while the Pixel looked much more natural. But there were other situations where Samsung handled a bright light source better and produced a more balanced exposure. Sometimes Pixel wins, sometimes the Galaxy wins. But one thing I definitely noticed though is how much faster night sight feels on the Pixel this year. Even though Tensor G6 is slower on paper, actually taking nighttime photos feels extremely quick, quicker than night shots on the Ultra. Video flips the camera conversation around. For photos, I prefer the Pixel. For video, I still trust the Galaxy more. Google has improved tremendously here. Regular video looks better than it did on the previous Pixel 10 Pro, and there were absolutely situations where the Pixel footage looked fantastic, but across everything I shot, Samsung was more consistent. Slow motion was one obvious example. The Pixel footage looked softer, noisier, and just generally more processed. The Galaxy wasn't producing red camera slow motion or anything, but it did look better. And Samsung has another huge advantage if you're actually a creator. And look, Google has added a bunch of really cool creator tools. There's a built-in teleprompter. I can paste my script directly into the camera app and have it scroll while I'm recording. There are grid lines, audio meters, stuff that somebody actually shooting content would appreciate. But here's the thing. Google gives me all these pro creator conveniences and then doesn't give me the same level of professional video control Samsung does. The Pixel can record 10-bit HDR, AVC, HEVC, and the usual consumer formats, but Samsung gives you proper log recording, and on the S26 Ultra, APV. You can shoot APV log, work with higher quality 422 files, and actually grade the footage properly afterward. For a creator, that's more valuable than any other AI gimmick. Battery life has been excellent. Interestingly, Google actually reduced the battery capacity slightly compared to last year's Pro XL. We're now at 5115 milliamp hours. But look, in actual usage, I've been getting better battery life. I'm easily making it through the entire day, and on lighter days where I'm around 3 hours of screen on time, I'm sometimes ending it with 50 or 60% remaining. The Galaxy S26 Ultra has also been excellent. These are both genuine all-day phones for me. If anything, I've had a slight edge toward the Pixel, but they're close enough that battery life would not be the reason I choose one over the other. As for charging, Samsung technically wins wired charging. It supports 60 watts compared to 45 on the Pixel. Wireless charging is the same on both. You get 25 watt Qi 2 charging. But Google does have one major convenience. They got magnets built into the Pixel, and I love this. Pixel Snap is basically Google's version of MagSafe, so you don't need a case to lock it on to accessories. So where does this leave us, right? Like, which phone should you buy? Well, Google made the decision a lot harder on itself by raising the price this year, and I get why they did it. RAM prices have gone up. The Pixel 11 Pro XL is now $1299 in the US. That's basically Galaxy S26 Ultra money. And unlike some previous Pixels, you're no longer able to say, well, yeah, you know what? Samsung gives you more hardware, but Pixel is cheaper. It isn't anymore. And the Galaxy gives you a faster processor, better gaming performance, an S Pen, privacy display, a better anti-reflective screen, more camera hardware, DeX, and significantly more professional video flexibility. If these two phones are sitting beside each other for the exact same price, for most people, I think you should go for the S26 Ultra. It just gives you more for your money. And the equation becomes even easier when Samsung starts discounting it, which I'm pretty sure you can find right now. But it's not that easy, right? Because here's the weird part. Like, if you asked me which phone I personally want in my pocket right now, and again, this is just me, I'd probably grab the Pixel. I like the Pixel software more. I like the way the phone feels more. I like the photo processing. I like some of Google's little AI features. Tensor G6 isn't remotely as powerful as Snapdragon, but Google finally seems to have figured out the efficiency and heat side of the equation. The entire phone just feels really refined. Samsung gives you more, Pixel makes me enjoy using the phone more. And I think that's ultimately the choice for most people. Look, let me know which one you choose in the comments below. If you're interested in either of them, I've left links in the description. If you have any questions, let me know. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.